It was a bright Sunday afternoon, and the Golden Spoon restaurant was bustling with families enjoying brunch. Sunlight streamed through large windows, painting warm patterns across the polished wooden tables. The clinking of glasses and the soft hum of chatter filled the air with a gentle sense of joy. In a cozy corner near the window, Mrs. Eloise Carter slowly approached a vacant table. She moved with care, gripping a polished wooden cane that had supported her for many years. Her deep brown eyes, wise with age, scanned the busy restaurant warmly. Eloise wore a simple yet elegant floral dress, her hair neatly styled beneath a small blue hat. She had planned this special brunch to celebrate her 75th birthday quietly. With a smile, she gently settled into the cushioned chair, feeling grateful to rest her tired feet. Eloise patiently waited, expecting a waiter to greet her, but minutes slowly passed without acknowledgement. Her gentle smile faded slightly as she noticed a young waiter glance her way, but continued to other tables. After another 10 minutes, Eloise gently raised her hand, signaling politely to the waiter. The waiter, a young man named Kyle, approached slowly, his face showing a slight annoyance. Without greeting her, Kyle asked abruptly, "Are you waiting for someone?" Eloise smiled gently, replying, "No, dear, just myself today. It's my birthday, and I wanted to treat myself." Kyle rolled his eyes slightly inside, clearly uninterested in Eloise's special day. He replied bluntly, "We're really busy today. Perhaps you might be more comfortable elsewhere." Eloise's heart sank slightly, surprised by Kyle's discourteous tone. "I'm quite comfortable here, thank you," Eloise responded, maintaining her gentle demeanor. Kyle shook his head impatiently, responding sharply, "Look, it's probably best you leave. We have others waiting." Eloise felt a pang of sadness, her excitement dampened by the young waiter's harsh words. Soft murmurs began rising from nearby tables as guests noticed the awkward exchange. Eloise politely said, "I don't understand why I'm not welcome. I've been coming here for many years." Kyle shrugged carelessly and said firmly, "Management policy, sorry." Eloise looked around, noticing others seated comfortably and eating happily, with no visible reason for her dismissal. Embarrassed but determined to maintain her dignity, she quietly asked, "May I speak with a manager, please?" Kyle sighed deeply, shaking his head and mumbling about unnecessary trouble as he walked away. Eloise felt sadness well within her, but chose to remain patient and calm. Nearby patrons whispered softly, noticing her quiet dignity amid the unfair situation. A woman from a nearby table reached out softly, saying, "Are you all right, ma'am?" Eloise nodded gently, smiling warmly and saying, "Thank you, dear. I'll be fine." Despite her calm appearance, Eloise wondered why she'd been singled out and treated so rudely. After another wait, she saw Kyle talking animatedly with a tall, serious-looking man near the kitchen. Eloise recognized him immediately as the restaurant manager, Mr. Edwards, whom she'd met before. As Mr. Edwards approached slowly, Eloise felt hope that things would soon be clarified. Kyle trailed behind a manager, still visibly annoyed but certain he'd done nothing wrong. Mr. Edwards stopped at Eloise's table, offering only a tight-lipped, uncomfortable smile. "Ma'am," Mr. Edwards began, clearly uncomfortable. "Perhaps you would indeed feel more comfortable elsewhere today." Eloise felt her heart tighten, stunned by the manager's unexpected stance. Quietly but firmly, she asked, "Is it because of who I am, or because of something else?" A heavy silence settled around Eloise's table, making her heart feel heavier with each passing second. Mr. Edwards hesitated, clearing his throat nervously before finally speaking in a low voice. "We just think another establishment might better suit your tastes," he said carefully, avoiding her questioning gaze. Eloise raised an eyebrow gently, sensing there was something he wasn't saying clearly. Her voice trembled slightly as she replied, "I've been a customer here for more than 30 years, Mr. Edwards." Mr. Edwards looked down uncomfortably, shifting his weight from one foot to another, unable to meet her eyes. Kyle crossed his arms impatiently, looking around as though wishing he could escape from the scene entirely. Eloise took a deep breath, determined not to let frustration overwhelm her sense of dignity. Her mind drifted briefly to happier memories at the Golden Spoon, birthdays, anniversaries, and joyful family gatherings. Eloise softly continued, "My late husband and I spent our anniversaries here, celebrated our children's graduations here, and even welcomed our first grandchild right here at this very table." Her gentle voice carried a quiet power, drawing the attention of other patrons who had begun listening intently. Mr. Edwards's face flushed slightly with embarrassment, though he still appeared unwilling to change his stance. Kyle shifted nervously, realizing perhaps that he had underestimated this elderly woman and the respect she commanded from those around her. Mr. Edwards finally spoke again, his voice quieter yet firm. "We just prefer to reserve this restaurant for a certain clientele now." Eloise's heart sank deeper at these words, understanding exactly what he implied by certain clientele. Soft murmurs and disapproving whispers rose from surrounding tables, customers visibly disturbed by the manager's thinly veiled discrimination. Eloise straightened slightly, refusing to shrink under their judgment, her eyes shining with strength and dignity. She calmly asked, "Are you refusing to serve me because of my race or my age, Mr. Edwards?" The question hung heavily in the air, creating an uncomfortable tension throughout the restaurant. Mr. Edwards began stammering nervously, clearly thrown off guard by her direct and honest confrontation. No, it's nothing like that," he quickly denied, but his shaky voice betrayed his discomfort and guilt. Kyle's earlier confidence faded as he glanced around the restaurant, noticing several guests watching disapprovingly. Eloise quietly shook her head and said, "I'm disappointed, Mr. Edwards. After all these years, I expected better from you." A gentle sadness was clear in her eyes, which seemed to pierce straight through his heart. At that moment, the entrance door opened, and a tall man dressed sharply in a navy blue suit entered swiftly. He carried himself with a powerful yet graceful presence, instantly drawing attention from nearly everyone inside. Eloise's heart brightened immediately as she recognized her son, David Carter, a prominent lawyer known throughout the city. David approached his mother swiftly, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder and quietly asking, "Is everything all right, Mom?" Eloise sighed gently and replied softly, "It seems I've suddenly become unwelcome here, David." Hearing his mother's words, David's expression turned serious, his gaze shifting sharply towards Mr. Edwards and Kyle. He calmly but firmly asked, "Can you explain precisely why my mother isn't being served, gentlemen?" Mr. Edwards looked even more nervous, visibly sweating as he tried to find an acceptable explanation. Kyle shrunk slightly, realizing too late the implications of disrespecting someone connected to a man as influential as David. The restaurant was now entirely silent, all eyes focused intensely on the unfolding confrontation. Eloise felt pride swell in her heart, seeing the strength and confidence her son exuded as he stood by her side. Mr. Edwards stumbled over his words, saying awkwardly, "I think there might have been a misunderstanding, sir." David shook his head slowly, firmly replying, "There was no misunderstanding. This seems clear enough to everyone here." Eloise gently squeezed her son's hand, grateful for his timely arrival and strong, comforting presence. The other patrons watched closely, whispers of recognition spreading as they realized who David Carter was. Eloise quietly said to David, loud enough for everyone to hear clearly, "I never thought I'd witness such discrimination in the place your father and I cherished so deeply." David's calm presence filled the restaurant, making the tension even more noticeable to everyone around. Eloise felt deeply comforted by her son's steady hand on her shoulder, reassuring her that she wasn't alone. Mr. Edwards nervously tugged at his collar, visibly shaken under the lawyer's confident scrutiny. Kyle stood silently, eyes wide with anxiety, now understanding the seriousness of his earlier behavior. David's voice, clear and powerful, broke through the tense silence as he asked again, "Will one of you please tell me why my mother has been refused service today?" Mr. Edwards glanced helplessly toward Kyle, silently begging for assistance, but the young waiter offered none. Eloise watched quietly, saddened by the spectacle, yet proud of her son's dignified response. Nearby, several guests pulled out their phones discreetly, recording the situation unfolding before them. Mr. Edwards finally sighed deeply and tried to explain, "We were just extremely busy today, sir. No offense was intended." David raised an eyebrow skeptically, replying, "Yet I clearly see several empty tables, and others who arrived later have been served." Eloise nodded slightly, validating her son's observations, noticing other guests murmuring agreement. A woman seated nearby gently leaned over, adding softly, "She's telling the truth. They've ignored her the entire time." David thanked the woman politely and turned again to Mr. Edwards, his voice firm yet calm. "I hope you realize this behavior is unacceptable, not just morally, but legally." Eloise could sense the manager's growing embarrassment as the reality of his discriminatory actions began sinking in. Kyle, now visibly ashamed, kept his eyes fixed firmly on the floor, wishing desperately to disappear from the scene he'd created. David continued, "My mother has been a loyal customer here for decades. Today, on her birthday, you've disrespected her openly." Eloise felt warmth in her heart, proud of David's respectful yet unyielding stance against injustice. Mr. Edwards cleared his throat nervously, attempting to salvage some dignity, and said weakly, Please allow me to apologize for any misunderstanding. David shook his head firmly and replied, This isn't simply a misunderstanding. It's a clear case of discrimination, Mr. Edwards. The manager swallowed hard, realizing he had underestimated both Eloise and her influential son. Eloise quietly watched the discomfort grow on Mr. Edwards' face, feeling compassion despite her own humiliation. David spoke directly to Kyle now, his voice steady. You treated my mother like she wasn't worthy of respect. I hope you understand why this is deeply hurtful. Kyle nodded slowly, looking genuinely remorseful, finally understanding the impact of his actions. Eloise felt slightly relieved seeing the young waiter's sincere regret, hoping he would learn from this painful experience. David then gently squeezed Eloise's hand, addressing the entire restaurant in a respectful yet authoritative tone. Let this serve as a reminder that every person deserves dignity, no matter their age or race. Several guests applauded quietly, nodding in heartfelt agreement with David's words. Eloise smiled warmly at her son, grateful for his courage to speak openly against unfairness. Mr. Edwards finally spoke, his voice quiet and genuinely apologetic. Mrs. Carter, please accept my sincere apology. My judgment was wrong, and I'm deeply ashamed. Eloise looked directly into his eyes, gently saying, I appreciate your apology, Mr. Edwards, but actions speak louder than words. David nodded firmly, adding calmly, My mother deserves more than just an apology. This establishment must do better. Eloise watched proudly as David's words resonated strongly throughout the room, stirring reflection among all present. Kyle hesitantly stepped forward, softly saying, Mrs. Carter, I treated you wrongly. I'm truly sorry. Eloise smiled gently at him, replying, Thank you. I believe you've learned an important lesson today. David gave Kyle an approving nod, acknowledging his newfound humility and honesty. Eloise, feeling more at ease now, quietly suggested to David, Perhaps we can celebrate elsewhere. This place no longer feels like home. David agreed warmly, saying, Absolutely, Mom. We'll find a place that truly values you. Eloise slowly stood from her chair, gracefully supported by David, preparing to leave the restaurant with dignity intact. Other guests, deeply moved by the scene they'd witnessed, began standing as well, applauding Eloise's courage and David's strength. Eloise felt warmth returning to her heart as she saw strangers supporting her in a moment of unexpected kindness. As they stepped toward the exit, Eloise softly whispered to David, Your father would be incredibly proud of you today. As David opened the heavy restaurant door, a refreshing breeze gently swept across Eloise's face, comforting her as they stepped outside. Eloise paused briefly, feeling the warmth of sunlight replace the tension she'd felt moments before. Standing beside her son on the bustling sidewalk, she took a deep breath, regaining the calm and peace she had temporarily lost. David carefully guided her to a nearby bench, nestled beneath a leafy oak tree offering shade from the bright sun. Eloise gratefully settled onto the bench, feeling thankful for her son's gentle care and support. David took a seat beside her, placing an arm comfortingly around her shoulders and softly asking, Are you all right, Mom? Eloise smiled warmly at him, her eyes soft with pride and affection as she gently replied, I'm all right, David. Having you here makes everything better. He returned her smile warmly, appreciating the resilience and grace his mother consistently showed, even in difficult situations. They quietly watched people strolling past, each immersed in their own lives, unaware of the emotional event Eloise had just experienced. Eloise sighed gently, remarking softly, It's disheartening, David. I never imagined I'd experience something like that at my age. David nodded thoughtfully, reflecting on how deeply the incident had hurt his mother despite her calm outward demeanor. Mom, he said quietly, I'm truly sorry you had to experience that, especially on your birthday. Eloise gently patted his hand, reassuring him softly, Don't apologize, sweetheart. You stood up for me bravely, just as your father would have. David smiled softly at the mention of his father, remembering clearly how his dad had always taught him to stand firm against injustice. Eloise looked up at the leaves rustling gently overhead, their calming whispers soothing her tired spirit. Maybe today was meant to remind others of the importance of kindness and respect, she thoughtfully reflected. David nodded in agreement, understanding the profound wisdom behind his mother's gentle words. Eloise continued softly, It's a painful lesson, but perhaps necessary if it helps others understand. David listened closely, always admiring his mother's deep compassion and optimism despite life's challenges. He quietly asked her, Do you remember when Dad used to tell us that strength was shown by how gracefully we handled life's difficulties? Eloise smiled fondly, replying softly, I do. He always believed true strength was found in kindness and dignity. David squeezed her hand gently, assuring her softly, "You've always shown that strength, Mom, especially today." Eloise felt a gentle warmth spread through her heart, grateful for her son's reassuring words. She looked toward the street, noticing several restaurant guests leaving and glancing sympathetically toward her. A few stopped briefly, offering smiles or quiet words of support, expressing their genuine respect and solidarity. Eloise graciously returned their kindness, grateful for their empathy and the reassurance it provided. After a quiet moment, David gently suggested, "Let's find another place to properly celebrate your special day." Eloise nodded warmly, feeling hopeful and comforted by her son's thoughtful suggestion. David stood carefully, offering Eloise his steady arm for support, which she happily accepted. Together, they began walking slowly along the street, seeking a new restaurant where Eloise could feel respected and welcomed. As they walked, Eloise noticed how tall and confident her son had become, recalling fond memories of him as a young boy. She softly said, "You know, David, your father often said you'd grow up to be someone special. He was right." David smiled warmly, touched deeply by his mother's words, replying softly, "I've always tried to make both of you proud." Eloise paused briefly, gently turning to face her son, and said sincerely, "You've succeeded beyond what either of us could have hoped." Her gentle voice carried deep emotion, bringing a slight moisture to David's eyes. They continued down the sidewalk, the sounds of traffic fading into the background as they shared stories and memories. Soon they approached a cozy cafe named Sunshine Cafe, its bright, welcoming decor instantly lifting Eloise's spirits. David smiled at his mother warmly, suggesting, "This place looks inviting. Shall we try it?" Eloise nodded happily, her spirits lifting with each step closer to this warm, inviting new beginning. As they approached the entrance, Eloise quietly said, "Maybe this will become our new special place." The Sunshine Cafe felt instantly warm and welcoming as Eloise and David stepped inside, a gentle bell jingling softly above the door. Soft music drifted through the air, blending peacefully with the faint chatter of content customers. The cozy interior featured brightly colored walls, cheerful paintings, and neatly arranged tables topped with fresh flowers. Eloise smiled brightly, immediately feeling a sense of comfort and belonging she had deeply missed earlier. A young waitress with a warm, sincere smile approached, greeting them cheerfully. "Welcome to Sunshine Cafe. Would you prefer a table near the window?" Eloise nodded gratefully, replying, "That would be wonderful. Thank you, dear." The waitress led them kindly to a table by a large window overlooking a beautiful garden filled with blooming flowers. Eloise carefully seated herself, feeling relieved and joyful once again. David watched his mother closely, noticing her eyes sparkling gently as she admired the charming surroundings. The waitress handed them menus with another friendly smile, softly saying, "My name is Lily, and I'll take care of you today." Eloise warmly thanked her, feeling appreciated and respected, a stark contrast from earlier experiences. David gently remarked, "This place already feels more welcoming than the last." Eloise nodded happily, replying softly, "It truly does, David. I feel at home here already." As they browsed the menus, Eloise's eyes brightened, noticing familiar dishes reminiscent of cherished family meals. "David," she said softly, "they have apple pie, your father's favorite." David smiled gently, his heart warming at the memory of his father eagerly awaiting dessert during family gatherings. "We should have some to honor his memory," David suggested kindly. Eloise smiled warmly, deeply touched by David's thoughtful suggestion, agreeing enthusiastically, "I like that very much." Moments later, Lily returned cheerfully to take their order, her attentive presence further brightening their spirits. Eloise quietly requested a cup of tea and a slice of the apple pie she had spotted on the menu. David ordered coffee and pie as well, smiling warmly at his mother, grateful to see her joyful expression returning. While waiting, Eloise gently reflected on how kindness and genuine care could instantly transform someone's day. "This cafe feels like the heart of our community," Eloise quietly observed, her voice filled with genuine admiration. David nodded thoughtfully, noticing other patrons smiling, laughing, and clearly enjoying their time together. Eloise continued softly, "Perhaps it's time we made new memories here, memories just as beautiful as the old ones." David warmly agreed, replying sincerely, "I'd love that, Mom. You deserve many more beautiful memories." Soon, Lily returned, carefully placing plates of warm apple pie and steaming drinks before them. Eloise gently thanked Lily again, deeply appreciating the waitress's genuine kindness and attentiveness. The delightful scent of warm cinnamon apples immediately evoked joyful memories, filling Eloise with quiet happiness. As they enjoyed their pie, Eloise softly said, "You know, David, kindness always leaves a lasting impression." David smiled warmly, understanding deeply what his mother meant, replying softly, "Today we've witnessed both sides clearly." Eloise nodded thoughtfully, adding quietly, "But I believe kindness will always win in the end." David admired his mother's unwavering optimism, understanding why she had always been his greatest inspiration. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, shifting comfortably between past memories and hopeful dreams for the future. Eloise quietly shared stories of David's childhood, recalling precious moments she had cherished deeply. David listened warmly, feeling grateful for the strong bond and shared experiences they continued to treasure. Eloise paused briefly, gently looking into David's eyes, saying softly, "Thank you for being here with me today. Your presence means the world." David gently took his mother's hand, reassuring her sincerely, "I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else." Eloise smiled softly, feeling completely loved, supported, and deeply cherished. As she looked around the cafe, Eloise gently whispered, "Perhaps today's struggles were meant to lead us here to a brighter place." As Eloise finished her apple pie, she felt warmth spreading through her heart, grateful for the peaceful moment she was sharing with David. The gentle hum of conversation filled the cafe, comforting her with its soft familiarity. Eloise quietly noticed the cafe's owner, a pleasant older woman named Margaret, approaching tables and warmly greeting customers. Margaret moved gracefully, her genuine smile radiating kindness to everyone around her. Eloise admired the personal attention and care Margaret provided, realizing why the cafe felt so inviting. Moments later, Margaret made her way over to Eloise and David's table, her eyes twinkling brightly with genuine warmth. Margaret greeted them warmly, her voice filled with sincerity. "Hello, I'm Margaret, the owner. I hope everything was enjoyable today." Eloise smiled kindly, replying softly, "Everything has been wonderful, thank you." Margaret glanced gently at the half-empty plates, pleased to see they had enjoyed their desserts. She gently added, "It's always lovely to welcome new faces. I hope you'll consider us a place where you always feel at home." David replied warmly, "You've already made us feel that way. Thank you." Margaret's expression softened thoughtfully, noticing something deep and meaningful in Eloise's eyes. She gently asked, "Is today a special occasion for you both?" Eloise hesitated slightly, unsure whether to share her earlier experience, but David gently encouraged her with a reassuring nod. With quiet dignity, Eloise softly explained, "Today is my 75th birthday. We originally planned to celebrate at another restaurant, but unfortunately, I faced unexpected discrimination there." Margaret's eyes widened in shock and sincere sadness, immediately understanding the depth of Eloise's pain. "I'm terribly sorry you experienced that," Margaret replied softly, clearly moved by Eloise's gentle strength. Eloise gently assured her, "It's all right. Being here with my son has reminded me that kindness still exists." Margaret gently placed her hand over her heart, touched deeply by Eloise's forgiving and optimistic spirit. She thoughtfully responded, "No one should ever feel unwelcome, especially on their birthday. Let me make it up to you in some way." Eloise softly smiled, genuinely appreciative of Margaret's kindness, replying, "Your genuine welcome has already made this day brighter." Margaret gently insisted, warmly adding, "Please allow me to offer you a gift. It's the least I can do to honor your special day." Before Eloise could politely decline, Margaret had already hurried to the kitchen, leaving them with warm smiles and laughter. David chuckled gently, softly saying, "Looks like you've made a new friend, Mom." Eloise laughed quietly, her spirits lifted even more by Margaret's spontaneous act of kindness. Moments later, Margaret returned, carrying a beautifully wrapped box tied neatly with a satin ribbon. Eloise's eyes sparkled gently with surprise as Margaret warmly placed the gift in front of her. Margaret softly said, "Happy birthday, Mrs. Carter. May today mark the beginning of many happy memories here at Sunshine Cafe." Eloise gently accepted the gift, deeply touched by Margaret's sincerity and warmth. Carefully opening the box, Eloise discovered a delicate porcelain teacup adorned with elegant floral patterns, matching her own refined style. Margaret explained softly, "It's a special piece from our cafe's collection, symbolizing warmth, friendship, and kindness, the very things I hope you feel each time you're here." Eloise gently held the teacup, feeling deeply moved by the thoughtful symbolism behind Margaret's meaningful gesture. Her voice softened as she replied sincerely, "Thank you, Margaret. You've truly made my birthday special again." Margaret smiled warmly, gently patting Eloise's hand, replying softly, "It is I who must thank you. Your presence has added something special here today." David smiled gently, observing the heartfelt connection between his mother and Margaret, appreciating how kindness had triumphed beautifully. Eloise carefully wrapped the precious gift, feeling incredibly thankful for the day's transformation from sadness to genuine joy. As Margaret excused herself to greet other patrons, Eloise quietly reflected, life always finds a way to bring warmth, even after the coldest moments. David nodded warmly, deeply moved by his mother's unwavering hopefulness and wisdom. Eloise gently looked around the cafe, quietly acknowledging that she'd found not just a welcoming new place, but meaningful connections and kindness as well. She softly said to David, her voice full of gratitude and contentment, perhaps everything today happened exactly as it needed to. After enjoying their peaceful meal and the heartfelt gift from Margaret, Eloise and David remained seated a while longer, savoring the quiet warmth of the cafe. Eloise cradled the delicate teacup in her hands, gently tracing its floral pattern with her fingers. A peaceful smile lingered on her face, heart full from the kindness she'd received in a place she hadn't expected it. David took a sip of his coffee and watched his mother fondly, grateful that the day had turned into a celebration after all. "You look truly happy now, Mom," he said softly, his voice full of affection. Eloise looked up and nodded, her eyes gleaming as she replied, "I am David. I really am." A gentle silence passed between them, rich with unspoken gratitude and love. Outside, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting golden beams through the cafe's windows. The light danced across Eloise's face, highlighting every line that told a story of strength, loss, laughter, and endurance. David pulled out his phone and snapped a quick photo of her, smiling. Capturing this moment, he said, showing her the image, "Because you're absolutely glowing right now." Eloise chuckled, covering her mouth shyly. "Oh, stop, I'm too old to glow." David shook his head, replying firmly, "You're never too old for beauty, especially yours." Eloise placed her hand over her heart, deeply moved by the tenderness in his words. "Your father would have loved this place," she said after a moment. "He always believed in finding light where there was darkness." David nodded thoughtfully, his mind briefly picturing the calm, wise man who had taught him to speak with courage and act with compassion. The soft clatter of dishes and the distant laughter of other diners created a peaceful rhythm that comforted them both. Eloise took another sip of tea, savoring the moment deeply. "It's strange," she murmured, "how a painful beginning can lead to something this beautiful." David smiled. "Sometimes the path we take isn't the one we planned, but ends up leading exactly where we're meant to be." Eloise nodded slowly, touched by her son's insight, proud of the man he'd become. "You've grown into someone your father, and I could never have imagined," she said quietly. David reached for her hand, gently giving it a squeeze, his voice thick with emotion. "I learned from the best." A few minutes later, Margaret returned with a small paper bag, smiling. "Here's something for later," she said kindly, placing it on the table. A few extra slices of pie on the house. Eloise beamed, heartwarming once again at the simple but sincere gesture. "You spoil us, Margaret," David said with a grateful smile. Margaret waved her hand dismissively, replying, "Only those who deserve it." Eloise stood slowly, and David rose to help her, offering his arm. She glanced once more around the cafe, then said warmly, "Thank you for everything, Margaret." "Truly." Margaret walked them to the door, replying, "It was an honor, Mrs. Carter. We hope to see you often." As they stepped outside, the cool early evening air greeted them, and Eloise took a deep breath, refreshed. "That was one of the most meaningful birthdays I've ever had," she said as they strolled down the sidewalk. David nodded, glancing at her with admiration. "You turned a cruel moment into something powerful, Mom." Eloise smiled, her eyes gazing softly toward the horizon. "Sometimes, dignity is the best response to hate." They walked quietly for a while, passing shops, street musicians, and neighbors greeting one another. With every step, Eloise felt lighter, as if the burden she'd carried from the morning had completely lifted. She turned to David and said gently, "I'm proud of you, not just for defending me, but for doing it with kindness." David looked at her with emotion, replying simply, "You taught me how." And as they continued their walk into the golden dusk, mother and son knew this birthday would be remembered, not for the pain it began with, but for the grace and love that carried it through.